All right, everybody, welcome to the live stream here today. I'm the host for the One True Calling community. If we haven't met before, I'm Gio Pensino. And today I've got an amazing guest, Andy Hess, who is an award-winning certified hypnotherapist, a rapid results coach, and an international speaker. And Andy has been working over 20 years. She has got over 20 years experience as a productivity consultant, a corporate trainer in organizational leadership professor, and has been featured on stages worldwide. And let me go ahead and bring Andy here onto the stage. Andy, so good to see you.
Hey, Gio, so good to see you too.
How are you doing today?
I'm always fantastic. How about you?
I am as well. I love what I do, and you and I are probably kindred spirits in that way. I want to jump right on into the conversation here, and the place where I want to jump on into might seem a little counterintuitive, but when I first met you at a wellness event, the thing that really caught me was your background before being a coach. And so can you talk about your background as a corporate trainer and a professor, and let's create a little bragging session because you've got some really cool things that you've done.
I feel like I have lived about a million lives because for me, I have basically been obsessed with how do you get what you want since I was like a child. And that started professionally for me. One of my very first jobs was with Franklin Covey as a productivity consultant. I was obsessed with the 7 habits, this idea of, it was a whole movement, right, in the early 90s, this idea of start with the end in mind. And like, how do you just decide what you want and then go get it, right? And so I've lived my whole life kind of that way as well, is just decide what you want and figure out how to get it. Decide what you want and figure out how to get it. So I love my position at Franklin Covey. And really, when I look back, that was a lot of coaching too, right? It's mid-level executives and they don't know how to achieve their goals so much. So you'd bring, the 7 habits and planners and all the things in to create a strategy and a structure. And then I moved into retail management and training, kind of became a regional trainer at companies like Radio Shack, again, back in the day, dating myself. But I just loved, like, what are you trying to do? There's got to be an easy way to do it, right? And so I would go in and I would train those teams as well as, my own. I ran a store in many different scenarios for a while. And then eventually I kind of transitioned into academia because I just love learning, right? I would learn everything I could. I basically have, it's because I had a tuition waiver for over a decade. I basically have degrees in like 27 things just for fun without like one class. But I loved learning. And when I landed there, I was actually really interested in the question of how we use knowledge from different places together. So I ended up in interdisciplinary studies, which was such a blessing because I got to work with all of these students and professors, and in my role as an expert, massively large science research teams that bring together knowledge from completely different worlds. And for me, it was how do you communicate that even to each other so that you can then go do the thing you want to do. Our unit also happened to have a leadership program, an organizational leadership program. And so I built a bunch of that as well. And where I ended up fitting in was actually in this space of transitions. So I ran the freshman courses that helped the students transition from high school to college. But then I also ran the senior capstones that helped them figure out how to get a career, right? Playing off my Franklin Covey kind of stuff there. And our international internships, which was part of my dream, was basically to have a job that paid me to kind of live abroad. And so I spent about 6 months a year in Europe teaching students how to do work in a new environment, a new cultural environment, and everything like that. So yeah, when I left the university, coaching was kind of always the thing I had been doing under the hood, if you will. And it just seemed like a really natural step.
So amazing. I feel like we should, after that introduction, I feel like we need to have like some 80s music playing in the background.
In all of my teaching, all of my like talks on stage and stuff, I find myself talking about things like cassette tapes and VCRs and MapQuest and things. And I'm like, oh my goodness, at some point here, I'm going to have to find new metaphors because the kids are not going to understand me.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it that does excite me is just, talking about the origins of these ideas and how, I mean, Franklin Covey, and like you said, these things that have influenced you and created your career and your foundations for your success. These are like world-changing ideas. I mean,
Yeah.
these truly have been like a global movement, which I know for a lot of people in coaching, and particularly in the area that I work in and you do as well, I believe, but in transformation and health and wellness, like we're at the edge of a whole new revolution right now that is like, I don't want to say it's the 80s all over again. It's like the 80s in transition to something like we're creating worlds now. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think that I haven't really thought deeply about why, but I think that we're starting to get this recognition that we really shouldn't be doing these things on our own, that we don't have to be doing these things on our own. And in certain arenas, it would be unthinkable to try to do it on your own, right? So you wouldn't ever expect to get to the Olympics without a coach. That
Yes.
would just not even,
You
people would
couldn't
call
do
you
it. Like you
stupid.
couldn't even do it.
Yeah. And so if you want to be at the top of any field, even just at the top of, your life, really, right? Playing this game of life, you're going to need a coach. Like everybody needs somebody to talk to. Everybody could really benefit from hearing from somebody who's walked it before. It's funny now as a hypnotherapist, the number one thing I hear in my office all the time, people come to me and they say, I'm broken. This thing seems to work for everyone else, but for some reason it doesn't work for me. And it's got to be me. And I'm the only one who struggles with this.
I can
And I
relate to
think
that.
yeah, it's every single one of us feels that way. And it's the kind of thing where simply the knowledge that you're not alone and that actually pretty much everyone feels like this, and maybe in different areas of their life, but there's a lot of people who struggle with the same thing you struggle with. And that means they've also had the chance to find a path through it. I think that's
Yes.
really important.
Yes. Yeah. Super important. It's really close to my own heart, and the center of, what I help people in health and wellness to do is to create community and to create learning communities, because
Yep.
it's funny because we easily accept the notion. I mean, we expect the notion that, like, rarely do we do teaching one-on-one, right? Like, it's not a very efficient way to do teaching. You can do it, you can
Right.
have a tutor, and that will help you go faster, but to have a whole group of people, and those crazy profit universities, or just,
Yeah.
maybe it's because of the population, but we've discovered that you can actually have 100 people in a room, and you can actually structure it in ways that people still can have individual breakouts and different things like this.
I think even more than that, one of the things that's always fascinated me, especially as I took that journey through, being a professor, is this idea that like all the information is actually already out there. You don't necessarily need to say go to college for the information, but the role of the teacher is that they actually have already been through all the information to such a degree that they can curate it for
Yes.
you and your level. So
Yes.
teaching is entirely about curation, right? And I
Yes.
think that's true inside the university, but also in this informal learning. And it's more true now than ever, because not only is that all the information out there, but there's now so much information and so much wrong information and so much incorrectly applied information that having a guide through the information, having someone to curate the experience for you, that's the important part of that. It's not that
Yeah.
you can't learn it on your own on YouTube. It's that you're going to spend all your time trying to figure out which YouTube video to watch, right?
Yeah. Yep. Ended up going down like multiple rabbit holes.
Yeah. And there's levels too, right? So, one of the things that I had to learn early on was, even though I have all this information, I'm super excited. I can't throw it all on a freshman who doesn't have any basis for it, right? I've got to teach you this before I can teach you this, and I've got to teach you that then next. And it's the ability to build that foundation with the scaffolding, like that really is what a good coach does. They meet you where you are and say, all right, I realize like you can't go from here to here just yet, but I know exactly what the steps are. And if you go like that, you'll get exactly where you need to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to that we can talk about. I do want to talk a little bit and ask you about your own transition from that corporate and academic environment. That's a very, in some ways, it's a fairly safe place because you do have a team, right? You have a structure and everything, and now you've made this transition. So let's talk a little bit. Share with me what triggered that transformation. Like, what was the spark for that? Because that's like I said, that's a big decision to make. Did you make it, or did you get pushed into it? How did that work?
Well, the universe is interesting, right? It does both at the same time. And it's funny that you ask because I've just recently agreed to tell this story actually in the Six Figure Chicks book series. So that'll be coming out in October. And so I've been writing this story right now, and I've been thinking very deeply about this transformation. And what happened for me is, as I mentioned in kind of that intro, everything was always just about decide what you want and how to get it. That's it. It's just that easy, right? And I found myself in a hospital bed in Serbia on a study abroad program that I was running. Of course, I was the faculty member on it. So I'm in charge of, 20 university kids in a foreign country. And I found myself in the hospital. And because it was in Serbia, nobody could talk to me. They'd come in and out and check my, stuff. But that's a long time to sit there with myself.
Mm.
And one of the things that I realized as I sat there thinking was that I had checked off my entire bucket list. Like everything that I had wanted to do, I had already done. So there were a lot of questions going through my mind, like, why are you still running this hard? What are you still hustling this hard for? Like, what is it you think you have to prove? You're already doing every single thing you want to do. There's, an extra title is going to get you literally nothing else that you already don't have. You have everything you want. What are you still running so hard for? And I realized at that moment that I had never stopped long enough to recognize that I'd already hit all those goals. In being obsessed with productivity, right? It was just always, what's the next goal? What's the next goal? What's the next goal? And for a lot of it, when you're busy and you're being successful and it's working, sometimes you don't take the time to go back and reassess what the higher level things are. So, David Allen in Getting Things Done talks about the, 50,000 foot level or whatever. And, Stephen Covey talks about a very similar thing, but there's these different levels of goals. And sometimes when you're in the day-to-day and the nitty-gritty, maybe you rise up a little bit. But I had never taken the time to really stop and reassess, where am I going? What do I want to do with this? And in that week that I sat in a hospital bed, like nearly dying, they thought I was going to die.
Wow.
Yeah, I had an infection. I was on IV antibiotics. I was on a liquid diet. So I'm weak and I'm delirious and I'm in a foreign country. And by the way, not a problem that I'm in a foreign country. Those are my favorite countries. It started in Bosnia. Actually, I got sick in Bosnia, which is literally my favorite country, and just kept going. And I finally had to give up and go to a hospital. But the timing of it was also a big kind of ego death moment for me. Because what I realized was that this program that I had been running at the time was sort of the culmination of everything I had been trying to do, including a bunch of proving myself, proving that it was possible, proving that I was good enough, proving that people should allow me to do these things. And it was the second run of that program. So I'd already had a successful version of it. And I realized I'm sitting here nearly dying in a hospital bed because I feel like I still need to prove something I've already proven. And that all is fantastic. Like realizing I had done everything I wanted to do, right? These are not bad problems. Oh, you checked off your bucket list by the time you're 37, go complain, right? But there's a sense in which when you've been entirely motivated by status, by recognition, by this push to achieve, and then you realize there's nothing left to achieve, all of the motivation goes away.
I can relate to that.
Literally. Yeah, all of it. And it was like, well, if I have everything I want, why am I going to get off the couch? Right? What am I still going to go work for? And so that kicked off basically a 3-year healing journey where, the best word that I can even use to describe it is unmoored. Like I just didn't know where I was going. I had no purpose or direction at that point.
And were you working during
Yeah.
that? You were still continuing to work through the transition?
Not only that, I had 4 more international trips booked for that year. And I ended up back home here in Arizona and in the hospital again for a different infection that they took the PICC line out of me the day before I flew back to Europe again. And so it was very much like, you have built this life for yourself that was your dream at one point, but you've been now doing it for so long that you way overdid it, right? You have just not even stopped to think about the fact that you don't need to be doing this anymore. And so, yes, I was still teaching. I was still working. That was a challenge because really, the bills still need to be paid, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. And it sounds like you, even though you maybe were released from the hospital, sounds like you probably were still going through a recovery process of some sort.
It was pretty rough. And it became very much apparent that, the one thing I really hadn't been able to do in all of that chasing was anything that was based on routine or habit, right? There was no sense of like, oh yeah, I have a morning routine, because my whole life was basically like, I don't know what city I'm waking up in today. And it might be something different than next week. And maybe I have to go lead a program today, or maybe I'm on my own. But I was spending about 6 months a year in Europe at that point, and coming back and forth all the time, which again was great. Like that was my dream as a child and everything. And I loved it. But here's the thing, the books don't cover this. So now you're like, okay, I've done everything I want. Like, where's this part in the productivity books? What's left? What do I do? I think a lot about Neil Armstrong and the way you must feel to like land back on Earth and know that the best thing the coolest thing you're ever going to do is over, right? You're never going to top that, no matter what you do in your life. And there's a bit of a melancholy that sets in with that. But more than that, you feel really guilty because what are you going to do? Complain? Like you're going to complain that you feel lost when other people are like, oh, poor you have everything you want, right?
Yeah.
So it started a 3-year healing process because I really didn't know what else to do. And so I just said, well, if I'm going to sit here, I'm going to sit here and work on every single trigger I can find, anything that is emotionally controlling me, anything that is causing me to react to anything. Anytime I find one, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There's a feeling there. There's something to go look into. And I started.
And was this what you're describing? The kind of self-discovery into the triggers. Was that kind of part of your hypnotherapy training, or does that kind of come from some other place?
Yeah. So I had been using self-hypnosis since I was 10. I found a cassette tape in a garage sale, back with those old 80s metaphors. And as a child, was just completely obsessed with the idea that I could change my brain in my sleep, right? That sounded so lazy and so easy, and life seemed hard. And so I had done that for, I listened to that same tape for 11 years until I lost it in a move and had to wait for the internet to be invented till I could find it again. But I had learned that this was a process to change things. And so yes,
looking into your triggers, looking into your triggers.
So then I started looking for other meditations and guided hypnosis and all of those sorts of things to attempt to get me somewhere. And it was just transformative. By the time I was kind of done with that, I mean, people call me like obnoxiously positive, and it's not fake in any way. It's just literally the way I've trained my brain to think. And so I went through all that before I actually decided to become a hypnotherapist, before I went through the additional training to learn all the tools and techniques and how to use them. I did it for myself.
So amazing. I have to double click on this thing that you brought up in terms of like your own experience, because I think it's common in particularly in high achievers, which is what you described. Having achieved something, and everybody has whatever. I don't even want to say necessarily levels. It's just a matter of having achieved a significant goal, whether you're an athlete or an astronaut or a business person. You achieve the thing that you set out, and then there becomes this moment where what's next? What's next? And so this what next thing sounds like it is probably, I'm going to imagine it may be common to this work that you do now in helping people to make transitions.
100%. I see a couple different kinds of clients, really. So one is, six-figure entrepreneurs who know that they're going to have to literally become someone different to get to 7, right? What got you here isn't going to get you there. There's only so much more you can hustle, right? Before something fundamentally has to change in the way that you do things. But that also happens with the other kind of group of clients that I see is women who are, have hit this midlife point. There's something that happens around midlife. Sometimes it's the kids moved out. Sometimes it's a career change. Sometimes it's divorce. But there's a point at which you realize, like, I have been living for everyone else. And it is time to go after my dreams. It is time to even decide what my dreams are. Who am I outside of this role of mother, wife? Even, without those things, even the corporate, I thought climbing the corporate ladder is what was going to do it for me. And here I am at the top and I'm miserable.
Yeah.
I've heard it called the golden handcuffs, right? Like you can't leave because, you've spent all this time building a career and, what are you going to do with it now? Just throw it away? Which is exactly the point that I found myself at. And I had to do, if I hadn't had hypnosis, I don't know if I could have actually made the jump, but I had to sit there and be like, becoming a faculty member is actually really hard. I was one of the top experts in the world in what I did. And, I was actually the president of our international association, our academic association. I had helped found it. It was well known. I was getting, grants in that area. And when I thought about quitting my job, it very much felt like I was throwing away an entire identity, as well as my whole community, all my friends. It's not really a place that feels very safe to leave. So there's something that happens when you go through that transition where you have to be willing, almost, in your body, it feels like almost willing to die.
Yeah, I was going to say that it sounds a lot like an ego death, or letting go of an identity. And like you said, it can happen for a lot of different reasons, like whatever the identity is, whether it's, wife or whatever it is. If you have to let that go, or you get called to let that go, it sounds like you got called to let that go.
Yeah. There were some big transitions happening at my university that kind of coincided with this, as well as, of course, for me. And I was still looking for purpose and for, what to do with the rest of my life. And there was just a moment that I knew I could not walk back into a classroom completely in integrity. And for me, that is where the other shoe drops, basically. If I cannot authentically step into an environment and speak as myself and be completely enthusiastic about what I'm doing, if I can't believe in those kinds of things, I have no ability to pretend. When I shut my mouth, subtitles come out of my face. It's just not something I'm capable of doing. And so I have basically forever, I just won't do it. If it gets to that point where I'm like, I cannot walk in and say these words authentically, I cannot show up as myself, that is my cue that I got to find something else. And at this point, I was in a similar transition, right? So I had just gone through all this with the program and the being sick and everything, but it was also COVID time. And my last child had just moved out of the house. And it was very much like who am I now? And
Mm.
who do I want to be? And honestly, I'm not even sure I've actually figured that out. But what I have figured out is that there's this thing that I get to do now that is absolutely amazing. And I love every minute of it. And I'm going to keep doing it until someone makes me stop.
Mm. So cool.
This is
I
so much fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
literally
Well,
get
plus
texts every day
it
that are
sounds like
like,
you've been perfectly, placed to do this, from your own journey and the transition and everything, and even what you described about, your children leaving the house. That's a really significant transition for many people, and I think it's not well spoken about. But I know I went through it a bunch of years ago, and it's a thing. It's really a thing. Do you find that many clients come to you? Are they aware of that being like the source of pain?
I think generally, yes, there's a feeling of like being lost, right? When any of those major pieces of our identity are kind of removed from us, whether that's your job or your relationship or your, the children or whatever, um, or even something like me where, it was a particular health challenge that just left me in a whole bunch of quiet. There's something that happens when you have to be like, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not right. And I think that's when people start looking for how to figure it out. That's what it is. It's looking for how to figure it out, because that's the model that we have. It's like, I've got to figure this out. And so most people come to me with this feeling of like, I don't know how to figure this out.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's curious because, like, I feel well. In fact, I know this just from our conversation and in both of our backgrounds, because we have a lot of things in common. Like, we're very blessed, you and I both, for having grown up with these things and having developed a lot of self awareness. Do you find some people come to you and they just really have no idea what the problem is
Oh, all the time.
all the
And
time?
normally even when they think they know what the problem is, that's not actually the problem.
Mm,
It's hardly ever the problem. Usually people will come to me with a symptom. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes it's overthinking. Sometimes it's, fear of rejection or something else like that. I'll get a lot of stuff in particular because I generally work with entrepreneurs. I'll get a lot of people who come to me for public speaking. And that's what they think they want to work on, but the minute we dig in, we find out there's like a whole bunch of other things just right under the surface, and we can literally get rid of the public speaking problem by dealing with some of the other things. And I think part of that is just that I'm super lucky. I've seen hundreds of clients at this point, and so I generally can tell if you come to me with a particular problem. It takes me like 3 questions to be like, oh yeah, I know what's going on. Actually, we
mm,
need to go here. Which I suppose goes back to that curation part, right? A good teacher knows that wherever you're at, here's the next things to do and for you to get to where you want to be. But yeah, it's very much, hypnotherapy is still not very well known. And so I don't think most people seek out a hypnotherapist as their first line of defense. It's
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I confirm that to be true. Because even myself, like, I shared with you, and I trained with hypnotherapists, Tony Robbins, Richard Bandler, many people,
yeah,
who basically created the foundations of what we call hypnotherapy. But even with that said, I don't think it's very clear on what that word really means, and it is part of actually what I try to help people to do, particularly coaches, because I don't think people come for hypnotherapy; they come for a certain problem.
correct. Absolutely correct. What I like to say is hypnosis is just a state of being. It's the normal natural state that everybody goes through twice a day, as you go from sleep to wake and back. But it's also the state that you have to be in if you're going to watch a movie and forget that you're sitting on your couch. It's the state that you're in when you're driving and you forget that, I don't know how I got home kind of thing. Hypnosis is this normal, natural, incredibly relaxed state that is parasympathetic activation. That's all it is. And hypnotherapy then is simply using that state, which is the rest and digest state. It's the only way you can learn stuff, for a therapeutic purpose. And that means to get what you want, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing magical about the hypnosis piece. It's just that your brain can only learn things if it's out of fight and flight, right? It can only learn if it feels safe enough to do so. And so putting you into that state helps you make that progress so much quicker.
Yeah. And there's a sort of a slightly nefarious part of it too, isn't there? And I want to just talk for just a minute about this, because what it triggered off for me is like the rest state. What we do to come into a state, we could call it rest, or even a safe state, or a state where we feel like we get a break. That can also be like negative activities as well, right? Like eating or drinking, like these different things, or watching TV, where we do these things and they're actually kind of positive in what their intent is, right? They allow us to to sort of relax, right? But they have a negative outcome to them. So maybe the trigger or the anchor is not correct.
Well, I think, kind of what you're getting at there is the idea that actually anything can be a coping mechanism, right?
Yes.
We all have coping mechanisms. We need coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms are very good things. Well, the problem is when we are using something as a coping mechanism that, number one, doesn't help us cope, or number two, has, additional consequences. Something like, cigarettes, for example. I tend not to do so much stop smoking, but it's obviously something most people know about for hypnosis. And one of the main reasons that people enjoy smoking is because it's relaxing. And one of the reasons it's relaxing is because it's the only time you take a damn deep breath.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's your body goes, hey, I want to go breathe deeply. I guess I'm going to go smoke, right? So coping mechanisms become a problem when the thing you're using is a problem, right? So whether that's smoking or shopping or eating or TV or
scrolling on social media.
It could even be hypnosis. Some people have asked me, like, can you overdo hypnosis? And my answer is generally not, until you find that you're using it to escape. Mm-hmm. If you're not willing to face whatever's happening in your reality, I've only had this happen maybe with like 2 clients ever. But things are so hard that you're like, okay, this is what I do to heal. I'm going to go do hypnosis again. And then you find yourself doing it 3 or 4 times a day or something like that. And you're using it for that purpose of escape. Even something like that can be, a coping mechanism that then has potentially negative consequences. But half my job really is keeping people out of hypnosis. So this goes back to your point. When we are in that kind of zoned out state, and that happens because we're overloaded, when we're in that state, we're not really present to make those decisions on our own. And then of course we're going to go on, habits, on patterns, on, whatever the brain has there. So part of the work that people do with me is we're going to train you to only go down into hypnosis when you choose to a count, right? 0 to 5, and to come up to that same count. And so you're training your brain that this is actually a state we're going to use for a purpose. And not all the other times when we're just zoned out and overloaded.
I love that. Well, I want to make a little bit of space to talk about, I guess, like how people first come into contact with you. Like how do people normally find you, and what is the first experience that they have?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of transformation you're looking for. I do a lot of events. I am very much in favor of being in the room. I like talking to people. So a lot of people just find me, through events or through speaking that I do. But I am on social media. I'm at Remix Coaching on Instagram. And I currently have a wait list for private services. That works a lot like, I'm going to say this, and it's nothing like traditional therapy, but the model works a lot like traditional therapy, where, we have an intake and then we do sessions. But I also have a group program that I love that is like magic. I love it. It feels like magic, that really harnesses the energy of the group. And I've created a method. If you don't have the results that you want in your life, you're missing one of these 3 steps, I guarantee it. And so I have a program where I teach those 3 steps, and we continue to live into them every day and see how they work in real life. And so that's what a lot of the work with me feels like. It includes hypnosis. It includes all the subconscious reprogramming, and it includes some fun activities using, ChatGPT and Canva to kind of bring everything to life, which is also really fun.
I love that. I love that. And I heard that you have a new book coming out. Is that right? Or you're featured
Yep.
in a book?
Yeah, so I will be sharing my story, and I shared just a tiny part of it here, but I'll share the whole story in the new Six Figure Chicks Scottsdale book. And so that is scheduled to release in ebook on October 2nd.
I love it. Well, I live in Scottsdale, and there is something about these Scottsdale six-figure chicks, because there's just a lot of women who are really high achievers here. And
It's a movement that I'm really proud to be a part of, because we started this conversation actually with this idea that other people have walked this already, and they can kind of show you how. And there's been a few different editions that have already come out, some Six Figure Chicks Phoenix books. And every single story in there is a story of overcoming, right? It's a story of how they got where they got by going through things. And the whole movement, it's much more than a book series. We have mentoring days for, young women who want to become entrepreneurs or who maybe are starting their entrepreneurship journey. Many of the women who have been in the multiple volumes served on the board with me for the National Association of Women Business Owners or other organizations like that. So these are all people who have dedicated their time and their stories to helping other people get there too. And I'm just really, really honored to be a part of this next book.
so cool. Yeah, like you said, it sounds like a lot more than a book. It sounds like a movement.
That's our goal.
Nice. Andy, is there other things that we haven't talked about that you want to make some space here before we wrap things up?
Actually, I also do want to mention, so I run the local holistic chamber of commerce here in Phoenix East Valley. And we have events every month to help connect holistic practitioners with business services, right? It's a chamber of commerce, but then also with the community. And so that's a really big passion of mine. It is one of the things I think was missing here in Phoenix until recently, is a space to bring that kind of entrepreneurship, education, and community back into to that group. So I'd be happy to have anyone listening come and join us for some of our events. If you go to that link, the Instagram link, my link in bio has every upcoming event that is always happening.
Okay, I love that. And it sounds like, and actually, I think this is where I met you too. Is that right? Wasn't that one of the chamber events?
It wasn't a chamber event, but it was a holistic health fair. And yes, I do a lot of those as well. I do a lot to get out in the community and meet other holistic practitioners and kind of, as I mentioned, right? Nobody comes to hypnotherapy as a first choice. It's not something that we think about. And there's a lot of other very useful healing modalities, different communities, different things to do, to get involved in, to use for your own healing. And I think it's really important to kind of spread the word on that.
Yeah, well, that's my community, so that's probably why my ears perked up so much about it.
Absolutely.
Well, Andy, it's so good talking to you. I could talk for a lot longer, but I want to respect your time because I know you got a busy schedule here. So I want to praise you for coming on today and for sharing your own journey of transition. And, many of the things that I heard you say, I can relate to, and I see in my own clients as well, this point of transition that comes up, and it comes up for different reasons. And it sounds like you are just such a resource for anybody who is going through that. So thanks for sharing your story, your wisdom. And I think we may have to have you on again.
Thank you so much. It would be an honor. I've definitely enjoyed the conversation. And you're right. There's so much out there. You shouldn't feel alone. That's my message, really. You're not alone.
Yeah, that's very comforting, especially if somebody is going through a transition or a challenge, just to know that and to know, what resource to go to. So
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Andy. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.